All right, go. Check. What? Check. Yeah. Start. That's on. Let me see if the. Yeah, I don't hear me either. So. Check. There we go. Okay. Jen got me a donut here, right? Okay, now we're good to go. Excellent. Well, welcome as we are here on this blessedly rainy Sunday morning. Here we are jumping into chapter 20 of the story. Or if you want to open up your Bible, take a look. It's the book of Esther as well. So we're going to have some fun with this. If you were in the Lifelight class, or one of those that I led several weeks back, this might be a little bit of a repeat, but that's okay. It'll be hopefully some good reminders there too. But let's open with prayer. Father, we thank you that you continue to be at work throughout history. We thank you for the provision that you give to us, even though it might be with an unseen hand. We pray that you would continue to guide us, that we might recognize your gifts, that we might give thanks to them, and we might live as your people, courageously sharing your gifts with the world. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, so if you remember 2 weeks back when we went through chapter 19, we had the return home. And God's people, where were they at as we were getting into chapter 19? They were in exile in Babylon, which had then been overtaken by the Persian Empire, more accurately, the Medo-Persian Empire. And then a decree was issued that people could return home. They could go back to the place from which they had been taken. And so many people, tens of thousands of the people of Judah, did go back home. But not everybody did. Why do you think that might be? So they got married to people that were there, and they weren't looking to go back over to this place they'd never been. So they were born in the new place. They're born in what is now the Persian Empire, way away from Judah. They like it there. Maybe they've become successful, because people did. So they became successful. And so they've got their life here. So rather than go back to a place that they maybe had never been before, they had it pretty good here. And so they're going to stay. So tens of thousands go back, the people of Judah there, and now the people that are there remaining become known as Jews, right? So the people of Judah, they're there, they're living, some generations pass. And as we get into the book of Esther, chapter 20 of the story, this is happening some decades after people had been, many decades after people had already returned back to Judah. So this is kind of a little bit of a side story for us here, a little bit of a detour on those things. So as we're taking a look at this, it's important to remember, okay, well, this is this is a branch over here, and we'll get back to the main part of the story next week as we get into chapter 21. So we're there in the Persian Empire, and we hear of the emperor, or the king, Ahasuerus, also known as Xerxes. And one of the things, because Xerxes is known in historical records, one of the things he is known for is multiple attempts to invade Greece. So the empire is big, and he's looking to expand it further. He's not successful, in case anybody was wondering. No spoiler alert there. But so he's trying to do that. So maybe in preparation for one of these things, or maybe this is where this idea to invade Greece is hatched, he has a big festival kind of showing off the might of the empire, gathering people together for a period of, what is it, like 6 months or so. It's like kind of this big festival, and they have a big banquet. All this celebration is happening. And one of the things that happens with celebrating and banquets is what? Some drinking going on. And there's a special edict that he offers as well here, that people normally, because if normally you go to a banquet with the king, can you drink as freely as you want? No. you can only drink when the king drinks. So there's this edict, though, he says, and as we see here at the beginning of this, that anybody can have as much as they want. Open bar. And as all of this goes on, there's all this celebrating. The Queen Vashti, she is having a celebration for the women elsewhere in the palace. And on the seventh day of this great feast, when all this is happening, the king's definitely, you could say he's been overserved, right? That he wants to have the queen come out so he can show her off to everybody because she's a beautiful queen. So he sends the servants to go and get her, but she refuses. She refuses to come at the king's command. This is going to be important remembering for later. And the king does not like it. But one of the things we see about Xerxes, not just here, but elsewhere in history and later on in Esther's book as well, that he does not act rashly. So he's going to take his time and think about something. So he gets really upset when Queen Vashti isn't coming. So what does he do? He gathers his wise men, his advisors, to come together and ask them, well, okay, what should we do about this queen who's refusing to come when she is called? Well, they say, well, you know what? You get rid of her, you exile her, and then you're good. He's like, oh, that sounds like a great idea. So Vashti's kicked out. She's deposed as queen, and there's that. At some point after this, maybe after Xerxes has gone and tried to take over Greece and failed, he comes back. And once he's back and home and kind of attending to home affairs, he starts to remember, oh, yeah, it'd probably be good for me to have a queen. And so they have this great contest, if you will, a great search for Persia's next queen. And they go through this. And this is something to remember, too. If the king's messengers come to your house looking for candidates for this thing, it's like, oh, hey, you're an attractive young woman. You're going to come with us. Do they have a chance to refute that? No, they're going. The king calls, you go. It's kind of the whole thing why Vashti got kicked out in the first place, right? So they come, and one of these young women that is summoned to be a part of this is a Jew. Her name is Hadassah, which means myrtle. Her Persian name is Esther, coming from the word for star. And she is summoned. She has been living with her cousin, her older cousin, / uncle. His name is Mordecai. He has taken her in because her parents have died. He's been raising her as his own daughter. But he has a position in Xerxes' court. So he's somebody that's kind of in the orbit of these things as well. So Esther goes in. She takes part of this. There is a whole process as well even before the women could go and see the king. They had this 12-month beauty regimen that they had to undergo before they could even see the king. So they're taken from their homes. They're kept kind of in the king's harems and cared for, prepared, and all of this. And Esther, as we hear, she wins the favor of the one who's the official, the eunuch who's in charge of taking care of things and taking care of things in the harem. So Esther is not just beautiful outside, but there is an inner beauty and a wisdom apparently that's at work in her as well. So when the time comes for Esther to go, that whoever goes, whichever of these women is going to go and see the king, they get to ask for whatever she wanted to take with her when she goes to see the king. And Esther, her thought here is, I'm going to ask the one who knows the king best, what should I take with me? So she does. And he tells her, it's like, okay, whatever it is, we don't know. But she goes, and when she goes, she wins the king's heart. And so it's probably not just because he thinks she's beautiful, because we've had a whole bunch of beautiful women come in here. It's kind of like a really weird version of The Bachelor, I guess. But she wins the king's heart, and she is made to be the queen. So there's another feast here, a great feast celebrating that Esther is the queen, and this is great stuff, and everything is fantastic, right? Now, as we continue on, the next thing it tells us is that Mordecai, who is somebody who's there kind of at the king's gate, he overhears that there's this plot between a couple of the king's soldiers that they are going to assassinate the king. And he gets word to Esther. Esther tells the king the plot is foiled. There's apparently note made of it, of kind of going in the official records, but that's all we hear about that for a while. Next player that comes on the scene is this guy Haman. And Haman is an important official. He's kind of a chief official under Xerxes. And he is somebody that, as we come to see, appreciates the honor that is bestowed upon him. And there is an edict that's given by the king that, okay, Haman's this big guy, he's this chief official. When Haman comes by, everybody's supposed to honor him or reverence him or bow. And people apparently do, and Haman likes it, but there's somebody that doesn't. Mordecai, Esther's uncle. He doesn't. Why doesn't he bow? It doesn't say. It doesn't say here in the book of Esther, but why do you think? Why is Haman not bowing why is Mordecai not bowing to Haman? He's a Jew, and he's only going to bow to God. You remember Daniel's three buddies? They got in some trouble for not bowing. That was for bowing to worship the statue that Nebuchadnezzar had set up some decades beforehand, many decades beforehand. But he's a Jew. And Haman learns this, and he doesn't like it. Because who's supposed to bow down to him? Everybody. So he decides that he is going to make a plot. He's like, all right, I'm not just going to get rid of Mordecai. Because what is it just that I get rid of this one guy? I'm going to get rid of all the Jews, and they're not bowing down to me rule. He doesn't like it. So he throws lots. He casts lots to try to figure out what the best time for executing his plan is going to be. And the word for lots is pur. And the plural for lot, a lot, is purim. So he casts these lots, finds, okay, it's going to be such and such a day, the 12th month. We're going to do it, and then this is going to be great. So he goes to the king. He goes to Xerxes. And listen to what he says. So there's a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among the peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom. Certain people. And they're all over the place. Their laws are different from those of every other people. They do not keep the king's laws. So it's not to the king's profit to tolerate them. So what's he saying? They're troublemakers. They don't listen to what you tell them to do. Now, is he bending the truth here? Oh, yeah. He's bending the truth, kind of making it sound like, okay, these people are going to be a problem if you let them stick around. So here's his proposal. If it please the king, let it be decreed that they be destroyed. And I'll pay 10,000 talents of silver into the hands of those who have the charge of the king's business. They put into the king's treasury. I'm going to give you this campaign donation of 10,000 talents of silver, all this money, if we get this happening. So the king gives his signet ring to Haman, so the kind of the official marker of the decree, and says, all right, don't put the money into the treasury, take the money and use it to put this plan into place, and do whatever seems good to you with this troublemaker people. Now, does the king know what the people are? No, Haman never says. He never specifies. Haman knows. It's the Jews he wants to get rid of. What's Esther? She's a Jew. But she doesn't, yeah. Exactly. And so we're gonna get into this. So Mordecai had throughout this entire thing told Esther, don't reveal your heritage, keep it on the down low. So she had followed that, and Esther at this point hasn't become aware of what this plot is. But so Haman has this plan. Okay, so this edict is then written, given the king's seal. So an irrevocable thing is sent out to the entire Persian Empire that on such and such a date that people might go and slaughter all the Jews in wherever the place that they are. The young and the old, the women, children, in one day, on this day, the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, to plunder their goods. So that decree is sent out everywhere. Now, important thing, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes. That's still part of the Persian Empire. I think at this point in time, even in Jerusalem, yeah. And I'd have to check on the chronology of it, but I think so. But throughout any place where Persia has influence, so this is sent out widespread like that. So now this is great. This order goes out from the king everywhere, and the king and Haman, they sit down to drink. Great, we have a plan. Fantastic. And then here's the thing: if you take a look in verse 15 of chapter 3, so that happens, and the king Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Susa was thrown into confusion because in the city there, do they know who this certain group of people is? Yeah, because it's part of the decree. Xerxes, whatever, he's like, okay. But the people there, they're thrown into confusion. There's chaos because they're like, what's going on here? Because they know the Jews. They're not like they're not making trouble. They're neighbors. And so, and the Jewish people there too, or the Jews, I should say. Judaism is a later thing. We ran through that one last time. But so the Jews there, they're not happy about this. So there's things are kind of overthrown. Now, Mordecai hears about it. He's in the king's court. He kind of does the traditional things for mourning and despair. He tears his clothes, sits in sackcloth, and puts on like burlap, sackcloth, and ashes, this very uncomfortable stuff. He goes up to the king's gate because he's looking to get word to Esther and to give this instruction to her. So the queen's upset because, her people are looking to be sacrificed here. They're massacred is probably a better word of saying it. She's like, okay, Mordecai, here's some good clothes. Just you can stop mourning. But so Mordecai gives this message. He tells everything that happened. He tells, okay, Haman, he's paid for this to happen. He's kind of worked towards swaying the king towards doing this. And here's the edict, all this stuff. And then here's basically where it gets to. We have this as our reading today for the worship service. Mordecai gets the message to Esther that says, don't think just because you're in the king's palace, just don't think that you're there, that you're going to be spared the fate of your people. Because you're a Jew as well. And even if you don't take action, God's going to, well, he doesn't say God. That's the thing there. Deliverance is going to come from somewhere else. Why does he think deliverance is going to come from somewhere else? Well, yeah, we'll get to that part, right? But who's to say you are not where you're at? Who's to say you haven't risen to this position in the kingdom? You haven't been made queen so that you could be the agent of mercy that's going to bring about deliverance. So Esther agrees. She says, all right, I'm going to fast. My retinue is going to fast as well for 3 days. Go gather as many Jews as you can. Have them fast as well. Remember me. I'm going to do what you've said. So she's going to go. Yes. So fasting specifically is the not eating and drinking, but historically would also have been a time for prayer as well. So it's a conjoined kind of thing. So in that time, they do that for preparation. Then Esther goes, gets herself all together, and then goes to see the king. But people can't go see the king unsolicited. If you go see the king without an invitation, if you just show up, chances are you're going to be killed. It's a capital offense, unless the king then extends his scepter to kind of show mercy, to give permission that you can be there. So Esther goes. She's taking her life in her hands by doing this. She goes. The king sees her. He holds out his scepter and welcomes her in. And Esther comes. The king says, "Well, what do you want? You're my beloved queen. What can I do for you?" And she says, "I want to give you a feast." Okay, let's do it. Let's have a feast. And I want to have a guest there. Who's the guest? Haman. Haman, the guy that's plotting to kill her and get rid of her people. So he's like, all right, let's have this feast. They have the feast. Haman is super thrilled about this because he's the guest of honor. The king and the queen are having him over for dinner. Everything's coming up Haman, right? And so he heads out from this banquet. This is a fantastic thing. And then he goes, and then as he's heading out, who's sitting there in the king's gate? Mordecai. And everybody else is bowing down to him, but who's not bowing down to him? Mordecai. This guy is like, and I can't get rid of him soon enough. It's kind of like Mordecai is this black hole for Haman. And he can't get away from focusing on him. So he goes home to his family and his friends. Everybody's together, saying, yeah, the king's done all this for me. And I've got all these riches. I've got all these kids. This is fantastic. I'm going to be going back for another feast that the queen wanted to invite me to. But you know what he says? Haman says, this is worth nothing to me. All this stuff I have because of this guy, Mordecai, who does not honor me the way that he should. He's got more riches than pretty much everybody else. He's got all this power, all these things. And so his wife and his friends, you know what you should do, Haman? You should build a gallows or a pike, depending on how you translate the word here, an instrument of execution that's 75 feet high, and have him killed on it. That'll make you feel better. And Mordecai's like, that's a great idea. Let's do that. Let's make it happen. So he does. It's either a pike or a gallows. He's like, spare no expense. Because this gallows or pike, whatever it is, this is a monument to his hate. This is how much I hate this guy. This giant, oversized, like a novelty gallows, right? The world's biggest ball of twine. I'm going to have it here. I'm going to get rid of this guy. I'm going to show everybody. This is what happens to people that don't respect me. So, okay, everything's right with the world again for with Haman. Haman goes back. He's going to get ready for the next day. But the king, that night between the two banquets, maybe he was overserved again, and his drink kind of disrupted his sleep. Maybe it was something else. He wakes up in the middle of the night. He can't get back to sleep, and so he has, hey, official, come here. Read me something boring. So they bring out the records of the kingdom. He's reading these things, all these different things that happened while Xerxes was king, and they come across this thing. Oh, there was this assassination plot against you that was foiled by Mordecai, the Jew. Like, oh, what do we do what's it say that we did to recognize him, to honor him? Nothing. We got to fix that. We need to do something to honor him. He's he's done a great service to the empire. And it's not right that it should go unrecognized. So about this time, it's getting to be morning. Haman comes like first thing because he's like, all right, I want to get everything. I want to get the king's permission to get rid of Mordecai, just get this done. So he's chomping at the bit. So he comes and the king is like, hey, who's here in the court? Oh, hey, Haman, he's a great guy. Haman, come here. I need your advice. There's somebody I want to honor. What do I need to do to honor somebody that really has done some great stuff for me, for the empire? And Haman's like, everything's coming up, Haman. King, let me tell you what you should do for this person that you want to honor. You want to give him royal robes. Put a crown on his head. Put him on a horse like the king wears. Who's Haman making himself out to be? Because Haman's assuming this is him, right? Haman's thinking, oh yeah, no, about time. But who's Haman making himself out to be? Like the king. And cherry on top, right? While I'm riding along on this horse wearing these robes and this crown and stuff like that, there needs to be somebody that's there kind of leading the way, saying, this is what happens to the person that the king decides to honor. Here's an example, right? What's King Xerxes say? That is a fantastic idea. Let's do that. Here's this guy, Mordecai, that I'm going to honor. He's the guy. Can you imagine Haman's face? Just the shock. Go and do that. Go and do all those things that you said. So who's the guy that needs to go around proclaiming this is what happens to the man that the king decides to honor? Haman. Haman himself is going to be going around saying, hey, yay, Mordecai. Yay, this is what happens to the man. So all this happens. Haman goes home back to his family and friends in despair because this is like the worst thing ever. He says, all right, so I had to do it. And, Mordecai the Jew, and his wife's like, wait, what now? He's a Jew? Oh, you're in for it. This is not going to go well for you. Why would she say that when thinking about the Jews? What do people know about the history of God's people? You don't want to mess with them. More particularly, you don't want to mess with their God. Because we've seen, like they would know, like these things that happened, the things that happened all the way back. We remember as we went through the story, the things that happened in Egypt, the things that happened after the Exodus, things that happened in the land, how they had dominion, all these things. So all of these things, don't mess with the Jews. And so this is just kind of adding more coals on Haman's head, and he's kind of despairing. But where's he supposed to be right now? At this second banquet. So the king's messengers come. Like, hey, time to go. Let's go. He might have forgotten about it. This second banquet, right, that he was thinking was in his honor, that he was so looking forward to. And so now he's going back. He's like, I don't know what's going on. They have the second banquet, and then it comes out. Like Esther, the King Xerxes says, I've had this first banquet for me. You have the second banquet for me. What do you want? Just let me know what you want. Just tell it to me. She's like, okay. And here's the thing. She says, my people have been sold. They've been bought. How were they bought? Haman paid a whole bunch of money that was going to go into the royal treasury so that this action might be taken. And if they've been sold into slavery, no biggie, because there would have been some benefit to you, the king. But that's not what's going to happen. What's going to happen is they've been sold to be killed, to be slaughtered. Me and my people. And the king's like, what now? Who's going to try to kill my beloved queen? Who's trying to kill her people? What's this? Who's done this? Here's the big reveal, right? Esther says, Haman, this enemy and foe, not enemy and foe of Esther and her people, but enemy and foe of who? The king. Because he's trying to take away the queen. He's trying to do harm to the king. The king, is he happy about this? No, he is not. He is not happy at all. But as we have seen, when Xerxes has been enraged, to his credit, he's going to go take a minute to think about it. He's going to go ponder what action needs to happen. So he goes off to the gardens to kind of take a breath. Haman is not a dumb man. He's like, oh, this is not going to be good for me. He understands things are not going to go his way here. And so what does he do? He pleads with Esther. What's Esther, by the way? Queen and a Jew. And how is he pleading with her? He's falling down at her feet, like on her couch, bowing before her. Why was Haman so upset with Mordecai? He wouldn't bow down to him. This Jew would not bow down to him. And now what is Haman doing? He's bowing down to a Jew for pleading for mercy. So probably what if you imagine, like, he's like bound to like maybe grabbing her feet or something like that. But the king comes back in and he sees this and he already was upset. And so whether this is kind of his perception is clouded by rage, or he sees, whatever Haman is doing is he's pleading for his life. He's like, oh no, you're done. Guards seize him, put a bag over his head, as they would for somebody that's going to be executed. And then conveniently, at that time, another one of the eunuchs comes in and says, hey, oh, Haman, yeah, I just saw that he's got this giant gallows or pike, whatever, in his yard that he's built, that he was gonna have Mordecai killed on. And the king's like, really? I like your thinking. And so Haman is hanged on his own gallows or skewered on his own pike. So when they say pride comes before a fall, there's a reason. So this happens, but what of the rest? One, Haman's sons are executed as well. The ones that he was talking about, all of these things, like these sons were killed. This estate that was Haman's, it's going to be given over to the queen for her management, and her uncle Mordecai is going to have that. Mordecai rises in prominence and officials there. And then, but what about the rest of the Jewish people, the Jews throughout the kingdom? Well, the king can't undo an edict that he has issued, so he's going to issue another edict. So Esther comes again. She comes and pleads before the king unsolicited again. This is the second time. And he extends the scepter to her, and she says, my people, the Jews, this edict, you've issued this edict, what can we do? He said, well, I can't revoke the first edict, but what I can do is this: I can issue a new edict that says, hey, all the Jews, they can arm themselves, they can prepare for this day when this is coming, and they can kill anybody that comes against them. They can kill any of these enemies that are trying to kill them. So they send out their fast horses, they go out, cover the empire. The Jews prepare, they make ready, and they allow them, they're allowed to defend their lives. They do, and then when the appointed day comes, when the king's edict was supposed to be carried out, when the enemies of the Jews were hoping to have victory over them, the opposite happens. The Jews are able to, yes. They did. So yeah, that's the thing. They became Jews too because they heard like, oh, don't mess with the Jews. I'm a Jew now too. So they then rallied. So there's this reversal, and then any of those who had decided to come against the Jews, they are killed. Even in Susa, there's 500 destroyed, and then Esther, asks the after this report comes in, the king tells Esther. Esther's like, well, what's your wish? What else do you want to do? She's like, if it pleases the king, let's add another day to it. And he does. And so there's 500 killed on the in Susa alone, 500 enemies of the Jews killed, then 300 more there the next day. So there's this huge reversal that the people are cared for. So Mordecai rises in prominence. The Jews decide they're going to remember this day as a feast, as an observance for all the years to come about how they've been delivered. And it's called Purim. So Pur, singular, lot, and Im is the plural in Hebrew, so the Purim. So this feast is remembered by Jews, by Jewish people to this day. Yes. So the first edict had been that the enemies of the Jews could destroy them and take their wealth, take their riches. But the second one, the Jews are not going, they're going to eliminate their enemies, but they're not going to take the enemy's wealth. So it's the higher ground in some ways. So they're not profiting off of the hate. That's my read on it, at least. So all this happens, but to wrap this up, right? So throughout this book of Esther, God's name is never mentioned, not a single time. So why is it in the Bible? If you were in worship already this weekend, we've already talked about that as part of the sermon. But a short version of it is that God's throughout this book. Even if his name's not mentioned, he's certainly the one who's doing these things, making things come together in such a way that all this happens. Because the timing of these events that come together, super unlikely to just happen. It's amazing, kind of the timing where things, or that Esther, who's this orphan, becomes the queen. That she is in that time, in that place. God is working to deliver his people throughout. So throughout the Persian Empire, including all the way back in Judah, God is working to deliver. God is the hand that's guiding all these things. So there's reason for including, because it is part of the history of God's people, of how he has continued to provide and protect, which we've seen as we've gone throughout the story. God has continued to be at work. So all this is happening in a way that's beyond human ability to have happen. Well, they can be loyal citizens, but there are certain religious practices that are going to separate them from of everybody else. So it's not that they're not being faithful. That's a whole nother discussion we could get into there. In Xerxes, I think it's about another 10, 13 years or so that he reigns before he dies. After what we hear of in Esther, but I don't think it's a matter of them being disloyal, because that's the thing. Haman was trying to twist the truth and saying they're disloyal. They weren't being disloyal. They weren't bowing down to Haman, because Haman's all about Haman. So yeah, I don't think it was an issue of like being a divided kingdom or anything like that. The Persian Empire was one of the greatest till Rome came along. All right. Anything else for this one? Because next week we're going to get into chapter 21, which is going to flash back to when the people get back. So it's kind of a little bit of a flashback in time for the people back in Judah and doing some of the rebuilding. We started talking about that with chapter 19 because I had skipped that track in my brain. Oh yeah, that's chapter 21. That's coming up there too, but that'll be there at that point. All right. Yeah. The gospel is God protecting. It's not explicit in the sense that it doesn't say God did this. So and we see that throughout Scripture too. We even see it like today. Just because we don't see, well, there's no prophet came and said God sent rain today in Belvedere, Northern Illinois. It's like, well, no, that's God sustains. So as we look and see kind of across, we don't try to put words in God's mouth, but we can recognize and give thanks for the goodness and the mercy that he shows. There is, and that's so. If you think about it, why does because we skipped over this part. I said we get back to it, and I forgot. Why does Mordecai say that deliverance will be raised up for the Jews if it's not from Esther? He believes God will do it. So there's a looking ahead. So just because it's not explicit here, Mordecai is probably aware of, okay, God's promise, the Messiah, we're looking ahead. God is faithful to his people. He's done all these things in the past, remembering the good that he has done and remembering that God is faithful. Because there's a reason too why Mordecai isn't bowing down to Haman, even if it's not made explicit in here. Okay, well, that's it for our time for today. We'll see you all next week. Actually, I won't. I'm going to be at North, but Pastor Richard will be in here with you guys next week. So thank you.